Villagers often relied on methods such as using small, contained fires or braziers to generate heat in their homes, often limited to the main room of a structure. Clothing was crafted from wool and animal furs, layered to retain body heat. Heavy bedding made from down and wool was common during cold nights. Communal areas such as the village hall served as places where families gathered, allowing for shared body heat and the warmth from a central fire. Edric stepped out of his modest home, the chill of the morning air biting at his cheeks. He pulled his woolen cloak tighter around him, the rough fibers scratching against his skin but keeping the cold at bay. As he made his way to the village center, he noticed Ethelwyn, a neighbor, gathering her children. "Come, children, we must hurry to the hall before the frost settles in," she called, her breath visible in the air. The village hall was a welcome sight. Smoke curled up from the communal fire, which crackled and popped, casting a warm glow across the grim faces of the villagers. They huddled close together, sharing stories of the previous night's frost and how they survived the biting cold. Wulfric, the village elder, sat near the fire, a blanket draped over his knees, recounting tales of their ancestors who braved even harsher winters. "We are fortunate to have a fire," Edric said, looking at the flickering flames. "But do you remember the winter of previous years? We nearly lost half the village to the cold." Laughter erupted around the fire, a warmth that reached beyond the physical heat as they remembered those dark days. "Let us not dwell on the past," Wulfric said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Instead, let us speak of how we will survive this winter together." Edric felt a sense of unity as they shared their stories, clinging to the hope that this winter would bring them closer rather than tear them apart. The fire provided a much-needed comfort, but it was the bonds of community that would truly keep them warm amid the bitter chill of medieval England. Edric watched the flames dance, their flickering light casting shadows that competed with the encroaching darkness outside. The cold winds howled through the cracks in the timbered walls of the hall, a reminder of the winter's chill that was yet to fully descend upon them. Beside him, Ethelwyn arranged a new stack of firewood, her movements efficient and practiced. The villagers had learned to make the most of their resources, and for her, gathering wood was an essential task that helped stave off the biting cold. "Do you think we'll have enough this year?" Ethelwyn asked, her brow furrowing as she placed another log onto the growing pile. "With the deer we hunted and the trees we felled, we should be able to keep the fires burning through the harshest of nights," Edric replied, his voice steady. He knew that the strength of their community lay in their ability to work together. The deer meat, salted and stored, would complement the wood, providing not only sustenance but also warmth through shared meals. The villagers had long relied on animal skins to drape over their shoulders, a practice Edric had learned from his father. Each skin had its own story. Every stitch told of a hunt successful or a winter survived. Wulfric, the village elder, had taken to advising the younger men on how best to prepare their clothing, emphasizing that layering was essential against the cold. Edric recalled a day not long ago when Wulfric had gathered the villagers around to remind them, "It's not just the fire that keeps us warm, but the skin we wear and the company we keep." As the evening wore on, Edric turned his attention to the hearth, pondering the villagers' reliance on the communal fire. While many homes had their own hearth, not everyone was as fortunate. The central fire pit in the long hall served not just for cooking, but as a gathering place where stories were shared and warmth was distributed among all who came. This social structure of sharing warmth and resources had been a lifeline, knitting the community closer together. Ethelwyn smiled as she caught Edric's gaze, perhaps sensing the thoughts swirling in his mind. "We could also create more blankets from the wool of the sheep, you know. The villagers have been successful in spinning the fibers." Edric nodded, encouraging her idea. "Yes, and if we work together, we can make them thick enough to be warm for even the coldest of nights. The women have always been skilled at this. It would be wise to have a communal spinning and weaving day soon. The thought of gathering everyone for such an event filled Edric with a sense of optimism. He could envision the laughter, the camaraderie, as they worked towards a common goal. The communal spirit was a source of warmth that no fire could rival. Wulfric had once told him, "The warmth of community can outlast even the fiercest blizzard. We share our fires, our food, and our stories. And in doing so, we ensure that none of us is left to brave the winter alone." As the night deepened and the fire crackled, Edric felt a sense of responsibility settle over him. He understood the weight of leadership, especially as they prepared for the challenges that winter would bring. The villagers needed to be reminded of their resilience, their history of surviving the cold with ingenuity and cooperation. Suddenly, a loud knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Edric rose, instinctively moving to answer it. The door creaked open to reveal a shivering figure wrapped in a tattered cloak. It was Garin, a fellow villager known for his resourcefulness, but also for his habit of wandering off into the woods for too long. "Garin, come in quickly, you're freezing," Edric exclaimed, ushering him inside. Garin stumbled in, his cheeks flushed with cold, and gratefully accepted a mug of warm ale that Ethelwyn offered. "I've come with news," Garin said, his breath visible in the chilled air. "I found a new grove of trees west of the village. They're thick and healthy, perfect for firewood. But there's a catch." Edric leaned closer, intrigued. "What is it?" "There's a wolf pack in that area. I spotted them while I was scouting. They seem to be moving closer to the village, likely searching for food. We'll need to be cautious when we go to harvest that wood." Garin's tone was grave, and the flicker of fear in his eyes was palpable. The atmosphere shifted. The warmth of the fire suddenly felt distant as the reality of their situation sank in. Edric exchanged glances with Ethelwyn and Wulfric, both understanding that this new threat could complicate their preparations for winter. "We must be strategic," Edric said, regaining his composure. "If we can gather enough wood quickly and stay vigilant, we can outsmart the wolves. Perhaps we can organize a group to scout the area before we send anyone to collect firewood." Ethelwyn nodded, her expression resolute. "We'll need to work together. If we set up watches on the way, we can ensure everyone's safety while we gather supplies." Wulfric, who had been listening thoughtfully, added, "And we should not underestimate the value of our animals. They'll need protecting as well. If the wolves get desperate, they may attack livestock." Edric felt a surge of determination. The villagers had faced challenges before, and this would be no different. They would adapt. They would survive. The fire crackled behind them, a reassuring reminder of their strength. As they began to formulate a plan, Edric realized the importance of focusing not just on the immediate threats, but also on the deeper bonds that would allow them to confront the winter together. They were not just preparing for the cold. They were preparing for a fight that required unity and resilience. In that moment, the fire felt warmer, and despite the looming danger, Edric could see the strength in their collective spirit shining through. As the night wore on, they discussed their plans in detail, setting up the first watch for the very next day. The villagers would gather together, pooling their strengths and knowledge, not only to fend off the wolves, but to fortify their community warmth against winter's embrace. Edric felt a sense of hope, knowing they could withstand whatever came their way. But as they finalized their strategies and shared glances filled with determination, Edric could not shake the feeling that the winter still held its own secrets, waiting to unveil them one chilling night at a time. And so, as they prepared for the challenges ahead, the question loomed. What other trials would they face before the snows melted away and spring returned? Edric took a deep breath, steeling himself for the days to come, the crackling fire behind him a symbol of their unity and a bulwark against the cold. And as they concluded their meeting, the air filled with a sense of purpose. Edric knew that tomorrow would mark the beginning of a new chapter in their struggle against winter's trials. Would they emerge victorious against the winter's chill and the lurking wolves? Or would they be tested in ways they had never anticipated? With these thoughts in mind, he turned to the group and said, "We will face whatever comes our way together. Our warmth is in our unity. Now let us prepare for the challenges that await us at dawn." The morning sun struggled to break through the thick blanket of clouds, casting a muted gray hue over the village. Edric led the group as they trudged through the snow, their feet sinking into its cold depths with each step. Wrapped tightly in animal skins, the villagers felt the chill of winter biting at their exposed faces. Ethelwyn flanked Edric, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Do you think we will find enough wood today?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. Edric nodded, determination etched on his features. "We must. The hearth in the hall is nearly empty. Without enough heat, we risk illness, and the children need warmth for their growth." Wulfric, a burly figure with a thick beard, paused to catch his breath. "Let's not forget to keep an eye out for wolves. They've been sighted near the outskirts of the woods. We need to be vigilant." Garen, the youngest of the group, drew closer to Ethelwyn, feeling a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "Do you think we'll see one?" he asked, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and wonder. "Let's hope we don't," Ethelwyn replied, casting a glance around the snowy expanse. "Wolves are best admired from a distance." As they ventured deeper into the woods, the trees loomed overhead, their branches heavy with snow. The group moved in a tight formation, each person aware of the need for unity in their quest. The sound of crunching snow beneath their boots was the only thing breaking the quiet, save for the occasional rustle of wildlife disturbed by their presence. The villagers had always known the woods to be a sanctuary during the day, filled with the warmth of sunlight filtering through the leaves in summer and the vibrancy of life. Now, in winter, the woods felt like a different world, one that demanded respect and caution. As they hunted for fallen branches and dead trees, the camaraderie among them grew. Edric pointed toward a massive oak, its trunk gnarled and thick. "That will do nicely," he said, leading the way. "We can gather from its base, and it should provide enough wood for a few days." As they worked, they shared stories of past winters, moments of hardship and triumph that had forged their community spirit. Ethelwyn recounted the winter of the Great Frost, when everyone had banded together to survive the cold, with community gatherings around the fires, sharing what little they had. "It is during times like these that we truly learn the meaning of warmth," she said, her tone reflective. "Not just from the flames, but from each other's company." Wulfric chuckled, his laughter echoing against the stark silence of the forest. "Aye, and let's not forget the amount of stew we had to share. No one could have survived without that hearty broth to warm our bellies." Just as they finished gathering enough wood, an eerie silence fell over the woods. The birds that had chirped earlier had vanished, and the only sound was the wind whispering through the trees. Edric felt a shiver run down his spine. "We should hurry back," he suggested, glancing at the diminishing light. "It's getting late, and we can't linger." As they began their trek back, a low growl echoed from behind them, deep and chilling. The group froze, instinctively clustering closer together. "Wolves," Garen whispered, his face paling. The fear in his voice was palpable. Ethelwyn reached for a branch, wielding it as a makeshift weapon. "Stay calm. We need to think strategically. If we move quietly and steadily, we may be able to avoid them." Edric nodded, his heart racing. "We cannot let fear dictate our actions. We stand together. If they come, we fight for each other." The growling intensified as a pair of glowing eyes appeared amid the trees, shimmering in the fading light. The wolves were not just a myth. They were real, and their presence reminded the villagers of the precarious balance of life in the woods. Edric's mind raced with thoughts of survival, and he knew they needed a plan. "We need to backtrack quietly," he whispered. "But if they approach, We scatter and regroup at the old oak tree nearby. It offers some protection. As they began inching backward, the wolves emerged from the shadows, 3 of them, sleek and hungry. They circled the group, their eyes fixed on the villagers. Wulfric gripped Ethelwyn's arm. "Do you think we can scare them off?" He glanced toward the wolves, his muscles tense. "We can try. We need to make ourselves look larger," Ethelwyn replied, raising her branch high. "On the count of 3, we all shout and wave our arms." Edric nodded and counted down, his heart pounding in his chest. 1, 2, 3, the villagers shouted, their voices merging into a cacophony of sound as they waved their arms and branches. The wolves hesitated, momentarily startled, but their instinct kicked in and they lunged forward. "Run," Edric shouted, and the group broke into a sprint, racing through the thick snow as the wolves pursued them. In the chaos of adrenaline and fear, they ran, weaving through the trees with the hope of reaching safety. The wind whipped against their faces, and the cold seemed irrelevant compared to the danger behind them. All thoughts of wood and warmth faded as survival took precedence, every heartbeat echoing the urgency of their flight. In the distance, the old oak tree loomed like a sanctuary, its sturdy trunk a beacon of hope. They could feel the wolves gaining on them, their growls reverberating through the woods, urging the villagers to dig deeper into their reserves of strength. As they neared the oak, Edric yelled, "We have to reach the tree. It's our only chance." They pushed harder, collapsing against the oak, using its trunk for support as they caught their breath. The wolves circled them, wary but curious, their growls now a low rumble that filled the air. It was a standoff, one that would test their unity and courage. Edric looked into the eyes of his companions, determination etched on each face. They had come together for warmth, but were now fighting not just for their survival, but for the very essence of their community. As the wolves closed in, Edric raised his branch, ready to defend his friends. "We will not go quietly," he shouted, channeling all his fear into resolve. The villagers formed a tight circle, hearts pounding, prepared to face whatever fate awaited them in the icy grip of the winter woods. It was a moment that would define them, a test of their spirit against the wild forces of nature. And as the first wolf lunged, they realized that the warmth they sought could emerge from the most unexpected places. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow over the snow-covered landscape, Edric and his companions huddled together near a large, ancient oak tree that stood defiantly against the biting wind. They had come to rely on this spot not just for its strategic vantage point, but because it served as a gathering place where ideas were shared and camaraderie was strengthened. Edric, his face weathered by the elements, rubbed his hands together and let out a breath that formed a mist in the cold air. "We must gather more wood today. The hearths are burning low, and we cannot afford to lose heat with the wolves so near. Their howls echo far too close for comfort," he stated, his voice firm yet laced with urgency. Ethelwyn, the village healer, nodded in agreement, her brow furrowed in concern. "I fear that the wolves are becoming bolder, Edric. With each passing day, they come closer to the village, drawn by the scent of our fires. We must not only gather wood, but also ensure that the perimeter is secure. We can set traps to deter them, at least for a while." She wrapped her fur-lined cloak tighter around her shoulders, her eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. Wulfric, the village blacksmith, chimed in. "And perhaps we can enlist others to help with the traps. If we work together, we can create a barrier that buys us some time. Garen can help too with his knowledge of the woods. He understands the behavior of these beasts better than anyone." Garen, often quiet but observant, nodded solemnly. "The wolves are testing our limits, and we must be prepared. I have seen their tracks closer to the village than I would like. We need to act swiftly. The winter has been particularly ruthless, and the hunger in their eyes is unmistakable. They are desperate, and desperation breeds danger. The group fell silent for a moment, the gravity of their situation weighing heavily on their shoulders. Striking the first blow against the wolves was not merely about survival. It was about preserving their way of life, their community, and the warmth they had fought so hard to maintain. As twilight descended, Edric decided to divide the tasks. Ethelwyn, you and Garen will gather herbs and prepare the remedies for those who might suffer from the cold. Wulfric and I will head deeper into the woods to gather more firewood and set the traps. Let's meet back here before the last light fades, he directed, his authoritative tone rallying the group to action. They split up as planned, with Edric and Wulfric making their way through the dense thickets, ever wary of the shadows that shifted just beyond their sight. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound being the crunch of snow beneath their boots. Wulfric's muscles tensed as he held his axe, ready to defend against any sudden threats. You think they can sense our fear? He asked, glancing sideways at Edric. Fear can be a weakness, but so can overconfidence. We must remain cautious and remember why we fight. Our families depend on us, and we will not falter, Edric replied, determination rising within him. They moved deeper into the woods, the air growing colder, and the trees seeming to close in around them. Hours passed as they gathered wood, their arms laden with heavy logs when they finally found a suitable spot to set their traps. Edric instructed Wulfric on the placement, knowing that the more natural it appeared, the better chance they had of snaring a wolf. Each muted thud of their axes and the snapping of branches felt like a declaration of defiance against the encroaching dark. Meanwhile, Ethelwyn and Garen worked diligently in a different part of the forest, collecting herbs and roots. Ethelwyn spoke in low tones about the remedies they could concoct, her hands deftly picking through the underbrush. These roots can help with frostbite, and I've heard that this particular herb can ward off sickness if brewed properly. We must ensure our people are strong, not just physically, but mentally too. Garen crouched down, inspecting a cluster of berries. These may be frozen, but they can still provide essential nutrients. We can dry some and keep them for nourishment. It's vital we maintain our strength, especially now. His deepest eyes reflected both caution and wisdom, a testament to his years spent in the woods. As the sun finally succumbed to the horizon, Ethelwyn felt a shiver run through her bones. We should turn back. The light is fading, and it's best we don't linger longer than necessary. The wolves are most active at night, and we need to ensure we return before dark. With that, they hurried back to the oak tree where Edric and Wulfric were already waiting, their faces flushed from the cold and labor. Edric raised an eyebrow, noting the bulging sacks they carried. "Did you manage to find enough food and herbs?" he queried, his voice tinged with hope. "More than enough to see us through the next few days," Ethelwyn replied, a small smile breaking through her weary expression. "And we've set aside some to share with the families who have fallen ill. They need our care as much as we need warmth." As they gathered around to share their findings, the atmosphere shifted. The laughter and camaraderie that filled the space momentarily chased away the chill of the night. Yet, the distant howls of wolves reminded them of their precarious existence. The sound echoed through the stillness, a chilling reminder that they were not alone, that danger lurked just beyond their reach. Edric looked at each of his companions, their faces illuminated by the waning light, and felt a surge of pride. Together, they were more than just individuals. They were a community, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. But as the howls grew closer, he knew that their bond would soon be tested once again. "We must fortify our position tonight. If we can hold the line, we may just outlast the darkest of this winter," Edric declared, his resolve hardening like the frost creeping along the forest floor. He gestured towards the tools and herbs. "Let's prepare our defenses. Tomorrow we will face the wolves head-on. It's time we showed them that our spirit cannot be broken." the air thickened with expectation, their unity steeling against the encroaching cold and danger. The plan was set, and with the impending confrontation looming, the villagers steeled themselves for the trials of the next day, a day that could change everything. As the fire crackled in the depths of the night, the villagers knew that their fight for survival and warmth was just beginning. The frost of winter was fierce, but so was their spirit, and their unity would be their greatest weapon against the wolves that threatened their existence. And so, as the moon cast a pale light over the village, Edric resolved to stand his ground. Tomorrow would be a day for bravery, a day to confront the shadows that whispered of danger and dread. But would their unity be enough to see them through this trial? The village of Eldergrove was alive with the hum of activity as its inhabitants busily gathered supplies and rallied together in their common cause. Edric, a tall man with a weathered face, took inventory of their meager resources. He had spent countless hours in the woods, assessing the extent of their firewood and animal skins, which were crucial for their survival against the biting cold of winter. He knew that the wolves were not merely a threat to their livestock. They posed a danger to the very existence of the community itself. Ethelwyn, with her gentle demeanor, moved among the villagers, offering encouragement and support where she could. She understood the importance of morale, especially as fear and uncertainty loomed over them like a dark cloud. "We are stronger together," she reminded them, her voice steady despite the tremors of anxiety that rippled through the crowd. Her presence helped to ease the tension and uplift the spirits of those around her. Meanwhile, Wulfric, the village's seasoned hunter, prepared for the task ahead. He had spent years tracking wolves, learning their patterns and behaviors. His experience gave him a confidence that was contagious. "Well-set traps along the western edge of the forest, where they're most likely to come from," he advised, pointing to a map that had been hastily drawn on a piece of parchment. "And with the moon full tonight, we'll have the advantage we need to outsmart them." Garen, the youngest of the group, looked on with wide eyes. He had never faced a pack of wolves before, and the prospect filled him with a mix of excitement and dread. "What if they come for us at night?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Edric knelt beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We will be ready, Garen. The fires will be tended, and we will watch each other's backs. Together, we will keep our homes safe." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the villagers gathered around the central clearing to finalize their plans. They brought forth their best weapons: clubs, bows, and sharpened stakes, all crafted with care over many months. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of anticipation and the smoke from the hearths that flickered in the background, a reminder of the warmth that they would fight to preserve. As they prepared, Ethelwyn distributed animal skins to those who would stand guard. "These will keep you warm as you watch the perimeter," she said, her voice firm yet comforting. The villagers wrapped themselves in the skins, the fur a reminder of the animals they honored and relied upon. The act of sharing these resources showed their commitment to one another and their resolve to face the night ahead. The first hour of watch was quiet, with the only sounds being the occasional crackle of the dying embers in the central fire and the rustle of leaves in the chilly wind. Edric stood at the edge of the clearing, his eyes scanning the tree line for any sign of movement. He felt a mix of determination and worry. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily on his shoulders. Ethelwyn joined him, her presence a comfort. "Do you think we're ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ready or not, we must protect our home," Edric replied, his gaze still fixed on the shadows. "We've trained and prepared as best we could, but the wolves, they are unpredictable." As the night deepened, the air grew colder, and the howls of wolves echoed in the distance, chilling their bones. The villagers tightened their grips on their weapons. They knew that this was a test of their unity and resolve. Suddenly, a rustling in the bushes nearby drew their attention. Edric motioned for silence, and all eyes turned toward the sound. A shadowy figure emerged. A wolf, larger than any they had seen before, its eyes glinting in the moonlight. It paused, sniffing the air, before retreating back into the darkness. "Did you see that?" Garen whispered, his voice quaking with fear. "Keep your wits about you," Wulfric instructed, his voice low and steady. "That's just one scout. They will not come alone." The villagers readied themselves, hearts pounding in their chests. They had done everything possible to prepare for this moment, but they could not help but feel that they were on the precipice of something larger than themselves. As the howling grew louder, echoing through the night, it was clear that the wolves were gathering. Moments later, the ground began to shake as several wolves emerged from the tree line, their forms sleek and powerful. Edric raised his weapon, calling for the villagers to form a line. "Stay calm and stick together," he shouted, trying to instill courage in their hearts as the beasts approached. The wolves circled the clearing, their eyes locked onto the villagers, hungry and calculating. The tension was palpable, each villager holding their breath. The howling ceased for a moment, replaced by the primal growls that resonated in the cold night air. Edric's heart raced as he recognized the moment they had been preparing for had finally come. It was not just a battle for warmth. It was a fight for their lives, a decisive moment that would determine the fate of the village. Then, without warning, the pack lunged forward and chaos erupted. Arrows flew and clubs swung as the villagers fought back against the advancing wolves. Edric's voice rose above the fray, calling out commands and urging everyone to hold their ground. Ethelwyn moved with grace among the fighters, tending to the wounded and shouting encouragement, her spirit unyielding despite the terror that surrounded them. Wulfric led the charge, using his knowledge of the wolves' tactics to outmaneuver the attackers, but even he could feel the weight of the odds stacked against them. Garen, driven by fear yet fueled by the collective spirit of his community, struck his first blow against a wolf. Oh, small victory in the midst of chaos. As the battle raged on, the villagers fought with everything they had, their determination shining as bright as the moon above. Together, they faced down the darkness of the night, not just for themselves, but for the future of Eldergrove. It was a test of their strength, courage, and the very bonds that held them together. But as the dust settled and the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon, they knew that the fight was far from over. The wolves were relentless, and the village's strength would soon be tested again. With heavy hearts, the villagers regrouped, tending to the wounded and assessing their losses. Edric knew that they had merely scratched the surface of the threat that loomed in the shadows. The next steps would be vital in ensuring their survival. As the sun began to rise, casting a warm glow over the village, Edric gathered the remaining villagers. They needed a new plan, one that would not only defend them, but also take the fight beyond their borders. Eldergrove could not stand alone against the wolves, and he understood that they needed to reach out for help and forge alliances beyond their immediate surroundings. The battle had only just begun, and the village would need to summon all its courage to face what lay ahead. The biting cold of winter had settled over the village like a heavy cloak, suffocating the warmth that once radiated from the hearths. Edric, Ethelwyn, Wulfric, and Garen gathered around the flickering light of the communal fire, their faces drawn and lips pressed tight against the chill. The flames danced, casting long shadows that seemed to mock their despair. Outside, the howls of wolves echoed through the trees, a relentless reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond their fragile defenses. Edric turned to Ethelwyn, whose eyes sparkled with determination despite the fear that gripped her heart. "We cannot fight this battle alone. The wolves grow bolder each night. If we do not seek allies, we risk losing everything we hold dear." Ethelwyn nodded, her voice steady. "We should reach out to the villagers of Eldergrove. They have survived harsh winters before and might possess knowledge of how to fend off the wolves. Wulfric, his face shadowed by a heavy brow, chimed in. Elder Grove, those villagers are known for their pride. Convincing them to join our cause will not be easy. Garin, who had remained silent up until now, finally spoke. But what choice do we have? We must try. If we can secure their support, we can gather wood for our fires more effectively and fortify our defenses. It would mean sharing warmth, both physical and communal. Edric took a deep breath, the weight of leadership settling heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at the flickering flames, recalling tales of how villagers banded together during past winters, sharing their resources and protecting one another. It's decided then. We set out at first light. But we must be cautious. The wolves are not the only threat. Distrust can be as deadly. As the group mulled over their plans, Edric felt a renewed sense of purpose. The community spirit that had fueled their ancestors through the coldest winters seemed to pulsate in the air around them, emboldening him to take action. The next morning, they would journey to Eldergrove, where they would face not only the harsh winter, but also the challenge of winning over their neighbors. The night passed slowly, the howls of wolves a constant reminder that they were not alone in their struggles. Despite the fears that gnawed at them, Edric felt hopeful. They would forge alliances, share the burden of warmth, and perhaps in doing so, rekindle the spirit of cooperation that once defined their lives. As dawn broke, the villagers prepared for the journey ahead. Cloaks were wrapped tightly around their shoulders, and animal skins were donned for extra warmth. They had gathered what few provisions remained in their homes, knowing that the trek to Eldergrove would be as dangerous as it was necessary. Edric led the way, his heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and resolve. The path to Eldergrove wound through dense forests, where the trees stood like sentinels, their bare branches silhouetted against the pale sky. The faint sound of rustling leaves and distant howls followed them as they progressed, feeding the tension that hung in the air. Each step felt heavier than the last, but Edric pressed on, knowing that their survival depended on what lay ahead. After hours of walking, they finally approached the outskirts of Eldergrove. The village appeared quiet, but there was a tension that hung in the air, a palpable distrust that seemed to seep from the ground itself. Edric motioned for his companions to halt. Let us approach with care. We must show them that we come not as beggars, but as equals seeking assistance against a common foe. As they crossed the threshold into Eldergrove, the villagers eyed them warily, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and hostility. Ethelwyn stepped forward, her voice carrying a warmth that contrasted sharply with the coldness of the atmosphere. Good people of Eldergrove, we come to you as neighbors in need. The wolves grow bolder, threatening both our villages. We seek your alliance. Together we can protect our homes and share our resources. The murmurs among the Eldergrove villagers grew louder, and Edric felt the weight of their scrutiny. It was Wulfric who finally broke the silence, stepping forward with a fierce determination in his eyes. We have faced the wolves alone for too long. If you help us gather wood for our fires, we can create a barrier to keep them at bay. Sharing warmth is not just a matter of fire. It is about survival. The leader of Eldergrove, a stout man named Oswald, crossed his arms and regarded them for a long moment. And what guarantee do we have that your people will not turn on us once we lend our aid? Trust is as fragile as the flames we kindle. Edric took a step forward, meeting Oswald's gaze directly. I cannot offer you guarantees, but I can promise this. We are willing to risk our lives for the safety of our families. Let our shared struggle against the wolves seal a bond of trust between us. Oswald studied Edric's earnest expression and finally nodded, albeit cautiously. Very well. We shall provide you with what we can. But know this. If any harm should come to our village through your actions, we will not hesitate to retaliate. With a sense of relief washing over him, Edric nodded. The fragile alliance had been forged, but it was clear that their journey was far from over. As the Elder Grove villagers shared what wood and resources they could spare, Edric felt a spark of hope igniting within him. Together, they could fortify both their villages against the encroaching threat of the wolves. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Edric gathered with his comrades and the new allies around a large bonfire. The flames flickered and crackled, casting light over faces that had once been strangers, but were now bound by a common goal. Stories were exchanged, laughter mingled with the seriousness of their plight, and for a brief moment, the cold seemed to fade away. Edric knew that they had only taken the first step, but it was a crucial one. The warmth of the fire was not just from the flames, it was kindled by the spirit of unity, a testament to their willingness to stand together against the darkness. They were no longer just villagers from different places. They were a collective force, ready to face the wolves that threatened their very existence. As the night wore on and the fire began to dwindle, Edric felt the weight of the next days pressing upon him. They had to make plans, strategize how to gather more resources, and ensure that their newfound alliance was fortified against the trials that lay ahead. With a resolute heart, he turned to his comrades, knowing that the journey was only just beginning. Tomorrow, we will lay the groundwork for our defenses and share our knowledge of the wolves' behavior. We must prepare ourselves for the battles to come, for the true test of our alliance will be how we stand together when the wolves come to our gates. As the embers of the fire glowed softly, Edric could almost hear the distant howls, a reminder of the danger yet to come. And he steeled himself for the challenges ahead, knowing they would have to navigate not only the wolves, but also the intricacies of trust that had yet to be fully established. The thick fog rolled in, wrapping the village of Elder Grove in a damp embrace as Edric stood at the edge of their encampment. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth, and the distant howls of the wolves echoed ominously through the trees. He felt a knot tightening in his stomach, not just from the fear of the approaching wolves, but from the uncertainty of their alliance with the villagers of Elder Grove. Ethelwyn, standing beside him, shivered slightly, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. "We mustn't let our guard down, Edric. The wolves are not our only threat," she said quietly, her breath visible in the chilly air. Wulfric, his brow furrowed in deep thought, nodded in agreement. "Ethelwyn's right. The villagers may seem welcoming, but their resources are scarce, and desperation can lead to dangerous decisions. We need a plan that accounts for both the wolves and any potential betrayal from the villagers." Garen, who had been sharpening his dagger, looked up. "Perhaps we could set traps around the perimeter. It would buy us some time and allow us to focus on the wolves. They are cunning, but they can be outsmarted." Oswald, who had been silent, finally spoke up. "We should also consider gathering resources from our surroundings. The forest holds more than just the wolves. There are herbs and plants we can use for warmth and sustenance. But we must be wary of the villagers' intentions as we gather them. If they see us as a threat or competition, it could turn disastrous." Edric listened intently, absorbing the wisdom of his comrades. He looked back at the potential allies in the distance. Their camp was bustling with energy, but he could sense an underlying tension. It was a fragile peace they were forging, one that could shatter with the slightest provocation. They spent the following hours working in tandem with the villagers, their collaborative efforts marked by cautious camaraderie. Edric noted the shared tasks, from gathering firewood to fortifying the borders of both camps with barricades of branches and stones. As day turned to dusk, the sky turned a brilliant shade of orange, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape. That night, the villagers invited Edric and his comrades to share in a meal. Surrounded by warmth and flickering lanterns, the atmosphere felt almost festive, yet Edric remained vigilant. He engaged in light conversation with a few of the villagers, but he kept his true thoughts hidden. The food was hearty, a mix of roots and small game, and the laughter seemed to come easily. But he couldn't shake the feeling that darkness lurked just beneath the surface. As the night wore on, the sound of wolves howling drew closer, a chilling reminder of their imminent threat. Edric felt the tension in the air shift, and he exchanged worried glances with his comrades. He could see the villagers' faces pale as the howls grew louder, unity fading into fear. "We should prepare for a fight," Wulfric suggested, his voice low but firm. "We cannot afford to be taken by surprise." Ethelwyn looked at the villagers, her expression serious. "We need to ensure that we are all on the same side. It would be wise to discuss our strategy openly." As Edric was about to call for a meeting, a man burst into their circle, panic written all over his face. "They're coming! The wolves are here!" Chaos erupted as everyone scrambled to their feet. Edric felt a surge of adrenaline, his instincts kicking in. He turned to his comrades as they began gathering weapons and armaments. "We fight together. We protect our camp," he shouted, rallying both his group and the villagers. They moved quickly, the firelight illuminating their determined faces as they prepared for the inevitable clash. Edric's heart raced as he organized the villagers, creating a defensive line. He positioned Wulfric and Garin at the front, weapons drawn, ready to face the oncoming threat. The first wolf emerged from the shadows, its eyes glinting in the flickering light. It was followed by another, then another, until a pack of 7 wolves surged forward, growling menacingly. Edric could feel the weight of their hungry gazes, and he steeled himself for the fight that was about to unfold. The first clash was jarring, the sound of growls mixed with the shouts of men as they fought to protect their home. Edric fought alongside Wulfric, their movements synchronized as they defended against the wolves, pushing them back with fierce determination. Ethelwyn, agile as ever, darted around the chaos, using her knowledge of herbs to create makeshift distractions. The battle was fierce, and as the night deepened, Edric could feel the weight of exhaustion pulling at him. The villagers fought valiantly, but it was clear that the wolves were relentless. Just when Edric thought they might gain the upper hand, a howl echoed from behind, signaling more wolves had joined the fray. "We need to regroup," he called out. "Fall back to the camp. We can use the fire to our advantage." As the group retreated, the flames flickered high, illuminating their surroundings and creating a barrier that the wolves hesitated to cross. Edric, breathing heavily, felt a moment of hope. But just as he thought they had found a temporary refuge, he noticed a shadow lurking at the edge of the camp. A figure watching. A villager he recognized but whose allegiance he questioned. The figure's lips curled into a sly smile. And in that moment, Edric understood. The real treachery was not just the wolves outside their camp, but also the betrayal brewing within their supposed alliance. As the howl of the wolves echoed in the distance, Edric knew they were far from safe, and that the next move was crucial for their survival. He turned to his comrades, urgency in his voice. "We may have to prepare for more than just the wolves. We need to uncover this deception before we find ourselves fighting on 2 fronts. We cannot let our guard down now." And with that, the storm of uncertainty loomed closer, threatening to unravel everything they had built. Edric rubbed his hands together, feeling the chill seep through the worn leather of his gloves. As the village elder, he had seen many winters, each one bringing its own set of challenges. He felt a profound obligation to protect. The villagers, especially with whispers of wolves prowling closer to the outskirts. It was not just the beasts he feared, it was the uncertainty that gnawed at his heart. The community had grown stronger over the years, but the shadows of betrayal were always lurking. Ethelwyn knelt by the hearth, where a small fire danced valiantly against the oppressive cold. She had taken it upon herself to gather the village women, teaching them how to insulate their homes with animal skins and thick woven blankets. We must work together, ladies. Warmth isn't simply about fire. It's about layering and sharing what we have, she encouraged, her voice steady and firm despite the frost on the window panes. Across the room, Wulfric watched her, a twinge of admiration swelling in his chest. The way she commanded attention was commendable, and he often found himself drawn to her spirit. He had once been tasked with gathering firewood, but the wolves had grown bolder this season, forcing him to reconsider his strategy. His brother, Garin, had bravely volunteered to join him, but Wulfric had insisted they take turns. The last thing they needed was for both of them to become prey. "The wolves are clever and quick," he muttered under his breath, recalling the tales of villagers who had been ambushed. "We should set traps and keep our eyes peeled. If they sense we are gathering wood, they will surely come." Oswald, who had been listening intently, interjected, But we cannot let fear rule us. If we are to survive, we must gather resources or surely freeze. We need to build a larger fire, one that can be seen from the woods to deter them." Edric nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps we can work in pairs. Set a watch while one gathers. If we spread out, we can cover more ground and lessen the risk. And have the larger fire at the center of the village to attract attention from any strays that wander too close." The plan set forth a spark of determination in the villagers. They rallied together, agreeing to take shifts, and within the hour they had formed a plan of action. Each family would contribute what they could spare, whether it be wood or skins, to bolster their defenses as the cold deepened. However, beneath the surface of camaraderie, a tension brewed. Garin was not as resolute as the others. He had noticed the furtive glances exchanged between some of the villagers. Whispers of dissent had reached his ears, accusations of hoarding supplies and distrust among neighbors. The sense of community that Edric spoke of felt fragile in those moments. He kept these thoughts to himself as he prepared for the next day's gathering. As night fell, the village was cast in shadows, with only the faint flicker of candlelight illuminating their homes. Edric, feeling a weight on his shoulders, strolled outside to the center of the village. The air was frigid, and the stars twinkled like distant fires in the dark sky. While he found peace in the solitude, his mind drifted to the rumors that had been circling amongst the villagers. What if the real threat was not just the wolves? He recalled a conversation with an elder from a neighboring village, warning him about outsiders that could take advantage of their desperate state. "Trust is a fragile thing in times of hardship," the elder had said. Edric was determined to ensure that Eldergrove would not fall into discord. The next morning, the villagers set out in pairs. Wulfric and Garin ventured into the woods, their eyes scanning for movement. "Stay close," Wulfric whispered, gripping his spear tightly. The trees loomed overhead, their branches bare and skeletal. Each snap of a twig made their hearts race. As they reached a clearing, Garin caught sight of tracks in the snow, unmistakably large and fresh. "Wolves," he murmured, his breath visible in the cold air. Wulfric knelt down to examine the tracks, pressing his palm into the snow. "We should turn back. They are close. We cannot risk running into them alone." Suddenly, a chilling howl echoed through the trees, sending shivers down their spines. It was not just one wolf, but a chorus that reverberated across the forest. They shared a glance, the realization dawning that a pack was nearby. Wulfric's instincts kicked in, and he motioned for Garin to retreat slowly. Meanwhile, Ethelwyn and Oswald were gathering kindling near the village. Unbeknownst to them, a figure lurked in the shadows, watching their every move. This was no wolf, but a man, an outsider, cloaked in furs and armed with a dagger, waiting for the moment to take advantage of the villagers' vulnerabilities. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, the villagers reconvened at the center. Edric stood before them, the warmth of the communal fire flickering in his eyes. Today we have gathered more than firewood. We have gathered strength. Let us share our stories of the day, so we may grow closer and recognize our true enemy. But before Garen could relate their encounter, a commotion erupted from the edge of the village. The sound of a snarling wolf pierced the air, and the villagers turned towards the noise with fear written across their faces. Just then, the cloaked figure slipped into their midst, a sinister smile curling on his lips as he observed the chaos unfold. Edric's heart raced as he called out for calm, sensing that the true threat was not only from the wolves stalking the outskirts, but also from the deceptive figure now among them. The villagers needed to unite as one, but could they trust one another in the midst of such peril? Edric stood by the edge of the village, his breath visible in the chilled air, watching as the last rays of sunlight dipped behind the horizon. The skeletal trees cast long shadows over the frostbitten ground, their branches like bony fingers reaching out as if to grasp the warmth that eluded them all. The villagers had gathered in the meager light of their communal hearths, sharing stories and the little heat that flickered from the flames. Ethelwyn, her cheeks flushed from the cold and the fire's warmth alike, was busy stitching together fragments of animal skins. Each piece was a testament to the community's resilience against the biting cold. "We need to gather more skins before the wolves grow bolder, Edric," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor of fear that laced her words. Edric nodded, knowing all too well the peril that lurked beyond their village. The strategic planning for gathering wood had become increasingly paramount, as the wolves had begun to hunt closer to their borders, emboldened by the scarcity of food in the frigid landscape. The villagers often traveled in groups, sharing weapons and wisdom to stave off danger. Meanwhile, Wulfric was examining the longhouse's entrance, checking the makeshift barricade that they had constructed from logs and stones. His brow furrowed with worry. If we don't find a way to ward off the wolves, we might not survive the winter. We can't lose anyone else to their hunger. Garen, who had been listening quietly, finally interjected, "Perhaps we should consider a pact with Eldergrove. They have more resources. Maybe they could spare us some wood or provisions in exchange for our help with their own dangers." The notion surprised the group. Eldergrove, a village that had thrived on the fringes of the forest, had always kept to themselves, wary of outsiders. However, desperation had a way of altering priorities. Ethelwyn contemplated the possibility. If we approach them with goodwill, they might see that we are not a threat. Oswald, the village elder, who had been listening intently, broke the silence. "It is not just the wolves we must fear. It's the greed that can blossom in the hearts of men. If we are to forge an alliance, we must tread carefully. Their distrust runs deep, but we have no choice. We must survive." The flickering firelight danced across their faces, illuminating the resolve in their eyes. With decisions looming, they began to discuss a plan. The villagers agreed to send a small party, including Edric and Ethelwyn, to Eldergrove. As the night grew colder, they wrapped themselves in layers of animal skins and prepared for the journey. Edric felt the weight of responsibility rest heavily on his shoulders. The risk was great, but the hope of cooperation might just be the warmth they needed to endure the winter. They set out at dawn, the ground still frosted, crunching underfoot as the sun began to rise. The path to Eldergrove was treacherous, winding through spaces where the trees grew thick and the shadows deepened. Edric led the way, his instincts sharpened from years of fending off threats. Ethelwyn followed close, her heart quickening as the forest whispered with the sounds of creatures stirring. Upon reaching the outskirts of Eldergrove, they noticed the stark contrast to their own village. The houses, though small, were sturdier, built from thick timber, and the smoke that curled from each chimney suggested a more bountiful harvest than their own. Yet, the atmosphere was tense. The villagers watched the newcomers with caution. Edric approached the center, where a group of Eldergrove's representatives had gathered. He could feel the weight of their stares, the judgment in their eyes. "We come in peace," he declared, his voice steady. "We seek to share resources, to protect our families from the wolves that threaten us both." An elder, tall and imposing, stepped forward. "Your village has been known to be proud, Edric. What guarantees do we have that you won't turn against us once? You have what you need?" Edric took a breath, searching for the right words. "We are not here to conquer, but to survive. The wolves do not care for borders. We must unite against a common enemy. We offer our strength and skills in exchange for your support. Together, we can stand against the darkness that threatens our homes." The elder pondered this, glancing back at his companions before murmuring something Edric could not decipher. Ethelwyn held her breath, heart pounding, praying that their plight would resonate with these wary villagers. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the elder nodded slowly. "We shall consider your proposal. But first, you must prove your worth. There are wolves prowling the edges of our territory as well, and we have suffered losses too. Aid us in a hunt, and we will see how sincere your intentions are." Edric exchanged a glance with Ethelwyn, who nodded resolutely. It was a risk, but one they had to take. They were led deeper into Eldergrove, where their knowledge of the land and the wolves would be tested. As they prepared for the hunt, Edric felt the weight of his decisions bearing down on him. The survival of both villages rested on the fragile threads of trust and cooperation. He could only hope they would emerge victorious, not just against the wolves, but also against the suspicions that lingered in the hearts of their newfound allies. As the group set out into the wilderness, armed and vigilant, the chilling howls of wolves echoed in the distance. The hunt was on, and their fates intertwined more than ever. But as they ventured deeper into the woods, another shadow loomed, a larger threat that had been quietly observing them from the shadows, inching closer with every heartbeat. The true test was just beginning, and they were not alone in this fight. Edric felt a shiver run down his spine as he sensed the presence of something more than just wolves haunting the forest. They were not only fighting for warmth, but for their very existence as the winds of change howled around them, setting the stage for a reckoning not yet realized. The snow crunched beneath their feet as they moved deeper into the forest, the trees looming tall and foreboding around them. Edric, taking the lead, glanced back to assess the group's morale. Ethelwyn walked closely behind him, her eyes scanning for any signs of danger. Garin, with his broad shoulders hunched against the wind, dragged a sled filled with skins and supplies, while Wulfric and Oswald brought up the rear, their hushed voices a mix of strategy and concern. "We need to find a suitable spot for gathering wood before the wolves catch our scent," Edric said, his voice firm yet urgent. The others nodded, understanding the weight of his words. The forest was alive, but in a way that felt threatening, like a predator waiting for its chance. Ethelwyn took the opportunity to remind them about their previous foraging trips. "The last time we ventured this far, we found a grove filled with fallen branches. It could be worth the risk again." Wulfric, ever the cautious one, shook his head. "But we must remain vigilant. The more we linger, the greater the chance of encountering those wolves. They've been more restless as the cold deepens." His tone was serious, echoing the truth that they all felt but dared not voice too loudly. Oswald's brow furrowed as he glanced at the darkening sky. "Let's make our gathering swift. Time is not on our side." With a silent agreement, they pressed on, deeper into the heart of the forest where the trees grew thicker and the light dimmed. Each member of the group became attuned to the sounds around them, the creaking of branches, the rustle of animals hiding, and the faint howls in the distance that sent a chill of apprehension through them. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a clearing where nature had generously left behind a collection of dry wood. Edric's eyes lit up as he surveyed the area. Here we can gather enough to last for several days. Ethelwyn knelt to examine the bundles of sticks. We should not waste time, then. Let's split into pairs to gather as much as we can. Garin, you work with me. Wulfric, you and Oswald take the other side of the clearing. The others agreed, and the pairs set off, each moving cautiously to maximize their haul without drawing attention. Edric and Ethelwyn quickly filled their arms with wood, laughing softly as they tossed twigs to one another, the camaraderie easing the tension. However, as they collected, the eerie sounds of the forest seemed to shift. The howls grew closer, sharper, as if a pack were hunting nearby. Edric's heart raced as he exchanged worried glances with Ethelwyn. We need to hurry. The sun is fading fast, just as they were about to return. To the others, a chilling howl echoed through the trees, silencing the forest. Edric held his breath, instinctively motioning for Ethelwyn to stay still. The air thickened with tension as they listened intently. It was no longer just the wind that stirred. They could hear the unmistakable sound of paws padding softly on the snow. Wulfric and Oswald, who had been gathering on the far side, suddenly emerged from the shadows, their faces pale. We have to go. Now Wulfric shouted, his urgency infectious. Before Edric could respond, a dark shape darted through the trees, a flash of fur and teeth that sent fear cascading through their group. The wolves had come, drawn by the scent of their presence, and they were hungry. Run, Ethelwyn cried, instinctively grasping Edric's arm as they dashed back towards the path they had come. Garin, burdened by his sled, struggled to keep pace, panic overtaking reason. Edric turned back momentarily to ensure the others were following. Keep together, he yelled, his voice barely carrying over the thrumming of their hearts and the howls of the hunting pack. As they sprinted through the trees, the sound of snarls grew louder, the wolves now fully aware of their presence. With every heavy breath, Edric pushed himself harder, drawing strength from the community spirit that had always defined their survival. They were not just fighting for warmth, but for their very lives. Bursting into the clearing where they had gathered wood, Edric made a split-second decision. We need to defend ourselves here. He quickly dropped the wood and began to stack it into a barrier, a desperate attempt to buy them time. Ethelwyn joined him, while Wulfric and Oswald gathered more fallen branches, their hearts racing, adrenaline fueling their efforts. The wolves emerged from the tree line, their eyes glinting with hunger. Edric's heart pounded as he finished stacking the last of the wood, sweat mingling with the cold air. The pack was upon them, circling with a primal intensity, but the makeshift barrier offered a thin line of hope. We can hold them off, Garin shouted, wielding a sturdy branch as a makeshift weapon. Stay strong, we'll outlast them. But the wolves were relentless, and Edric felt the weight of despair creeping in. Just a little longer, he urged, gathering his courage, knowing that the survival of their group depended on their unity and resolve. He could feel Ethelwyn's presence next to him, her determination matching his own. With a fierce resolve, they stood together as the wolves lunged, prepared to defend their makeshift fort. Edric took a deep breath, preparing for the onslaught, when suddenly a new sound broke through the chaos, a low rumbling that echoed through the woods. The wolves hesitated, their keen instincts reacting to the unfamiliar sound, and in that fleeting moment of confusion, Edric caught sight of a figure emerging from the trees, an elder from Eldergrove, known for their wisdom and connection to the forest. He raised a staff high, and a calm presence enveloped the clearing. As the wolves paused, Edric realized that this encounter would not merely be a battle for survival, but a pivotal moment that could alter their fate. Would the elder guide them to safety, or would they face the full wrath of the wolves? The decision hung in the air like the last light of day, a choice that could forever change the course of their intertwined destinies. In the harsh realities of medieval winters, English villagers like Edric, Ethelwyn, Wulfric, Garin, and Oswald found innovative ways to keep warm despite the challenges they faced. Relying on animal skins, communal sharing, and strategic planning for wood collection, they not only survived but fostered a spirit of togetherness that helped them endure. Their stories remind us of the resilience of human beings in the face of adversity. Ultimately, the warmth of their bonds proved just as vital as the physical warmth they sought, illustrating that even in the coldest of times, community and cooperation can light the way forward.